What's up, everybody? So we're already into the second arc for the final season of Star Wars The Clone Wars on Disney Plus Season 7, Episode 5, Lost with a Trace. This, of course, is the returning Episode 4, Ahsoka, and now she is back with us in the series for the final remaining 8 episodes of the show. This begins her 4-episode sort of transitionary arc into the Siege of Mandalore, where she's down in the underworld of Coruscant, helping out two girls by the name of Rafa and Trace. And this, I have to say, man, while it is a slower introductory episode into the story arc, I absolutely was blown away by 3 things. 1, Ahsoka. Ashley's return to the role is just so great and so exciting, and Ahsoka is being played now as just she's so much more mature here in this episode, more so than even in Rebels. I mean, Ahsoka has completely since grown up fully since leaving the Jedi Order, I would say, and maybe that's an overstatement. But Ahsoka is just so much more mature just in this one episode. I mean, it is so noticeable and really interesting. And 2, the animation is gorgeous. I mean, more so than even the Bad Batch arc. I could not get over how stunning all of the characters looked. I mean, Ahsoka, Trace, Rafa, even the gangsters. I mean, just incredible. Just so natural. Their movements so fluid, everything so crisp and so clear in Coruscant as well. Coruscant being so much more detailed now, the lighting being so much better now. I cannot believe how stunning it looks. It just all looks so expensive. I mean, it is phenomenal. The underworld of Coruscant just looks incredible. And they're on level 1313, so that's exciting. Always great to be back in 1313, being reminded of that game that was never made, but that's okay. I really like just how gritty the episode is as well, right? You have Trace and Rafa, these 2 new characters that Ahsoka is meeting, and they're kind of walking Ahsoka through the everyday struggles, financial struggles, and just trying to scrounge together money with the local dealers down there and buyers and other gangsters and thugs, and just trying to survive, the 2 of them, by not trusting anyone and not having enough parts and you know, no one really having any money. Just all these little details throughout the episode that just make it so authentic, that make it so real. And they're not sacrificing the charm of Star Wars in the process, right? It's not like Rebels, where they kind of forfeit a lot of that in favor of camp and in favor of one-liners and cheesy jokes or kind of forced energy where there otherwise wasn't any, if that makes sense. I think Trace and Rafa bring a much more natural charisma and you know, charm and energy into just this first episode, which is great, because I really appreciate that. I appreciate real and authentic characters again in Star Wars, and I'm glad the Clone Wars did not reinvent itself to accommodate what has come since. And I think having that is really reassuring for me, that even the Clone Wars, when in this final season they take 4 episodes to follow Ahsoka around in the underworld of Coruscant, a seemingly slower or even, you know, semi-uneventful story arc still has a lot to offer. And I think that's cool. I think that's important. I appreciate it. And I am just so glad this is happening. And it was absolutely incredible seeing Ahsoka again in the Clone Wars in a brand new episode that really didn't have a full story arc, or I'm sorry, story reel release, just all totally new. And we're back with Ahsoka for the next 8 weeks until the series finally closes out. So I can't wait for next week. Can't wait to see how this story arc develops. I did get started on my custom Ahsoka. I've been working on this sculpt for the last week now during this crisis going on, and it's turning out really great. I got the first layers of paint on it, and I cannot wait to continue working on it as this story arc progresses and we move into the Siege of Mandalore eventually. So I will catch you guys next week. We have officially reached the halfway point for the final season of Star Wars The Clone Wars. This episode, Deal No Deal, is the longest episode of the entire Clone Wars series, which is pretty crazy. So episode 7, Deal No Deal, I think, for me was just really great because it was everything that Star Wars Rebels wasn't, right? It's got the sort of lighthearted, campy tone for the majority of it, but it still tells a really solid and a really realistic in-universe story, and the dialogue is all super meaningful between the characters, and there are just so many really great sequences throughout the episode, and unexpected sequences as well, like getting to see Kessel again now 2 years, or almost 3 years since Solo came out. No, that was 2 years. 2 years ago, and I have to say it was really cool seeing the brighter, sunnier part of the planet where the elitists live, right, and those who profit off of the hard work of, as it's later revealed, all the slaves that are being used to mine and essentially, you know, generate revenue via all that spice mining that's going on there. And it's just a really good episode overall. I think that the animation, probably this time around, it's just the animation just continues and continues to surprise me as we move through these episodes. I think Ahsoka was just so realistic and natural and fluid, even more so than last week. It only gets better and better. I mean, Ashley Eckstein's performance as Ahsoka is better than it's ever been before. There are little nuances in her performance, in all of their performances, that actually make them feel like they are physically in the locations that they are present in, whether that's down in the underworld of Coruscant and they're stepping around off of contraptions or off of ships and onto the ground, or, you know, whether they're jumping onto things. I mean, they just actually seem like they're physically in that space now, and I think that's really cool. I mean, then all of the extra characters, this really stood out to me. All of the extra characters and their different character designs, like all the models, are all new and so much more detailed. You know, where it's not just Mandalorian guy for everyone now. There's actually a variety of human characters that's presented in this episode, which was really cool to see. Because I don't know how many times you can use that Mandalorian guy before it gets really, really even more weird than it already is. And just different things like that, and getting to see just how the two sisters, Trace and Rafa, kind of respond to getting in on their first jobs, right? And stepping out of the Coruscant underworld and into the real galaxy with real crime syndicates like the Pikes, or like those found on Kessel, the guys who you really don't mess with unless you are with the Republic, right? Or with the CIS, or, you know, a bounty hunter who can handle it. Whereas seeing what that perspective is like for Trace and Rafa, who really have grown up in the underworld of Coruscant and don't know any better. This is their first time actually venturing into that part of the galaxy, the more serious part of the galaxy, was really interesting because they just genuinely don't know what they're in for. Whereas Ahsoka, the entire episode is trying to hide from them that she's a Jedi, or was a Jedi, and could clearly pretty much solve the entire situation that they get themselves into with this episode when Trace just spontaneously dumps all the spice they collected on Kessel. I mean, the whole episode is just really, it's a really great ride. It drags a little bit here and there, but I couldn't care less because I just find myself so invested in just this time that we're spending with Ahsoka and Trace and Rafa as they go through the galaxy, seemingly for the first time, which is really cool. I mean, if this was the first time that they kind of have spent a significant amount of time off of Coruscant, it didn't really seem like too significant of a moment for Trace, but I suppose that's okay, even though she's she's got her ship that she built from scratch, which was really cool. I mean, this whole episode was great. It was a great part 2, and for me, really kind of quelled the kind of absolve the concerns that I think the first episode of this arc presented, in just kind of wondering, okay, is it going to be slow and kind of, is it going to be more nonsense like this with the droid and just nothing really going on, or is this story actually going to pick up and are we going somewhere? And I think that this episode does exactly that. And there was one sequence earlier on in the episode that I have to mention with Anakin and Admiral Yularen on board a Venator, right above the Jedi Temple, basically on Coruscant, above the main city, and it was just really cool seeing Ahsoka, on board a ship pass by and seeing the Republic from a civilian angle, and Ahsoka being in that situation, and then having her and Anakin sense each other was just wild. It was a subtle scene, but it was just fantastic. And so I think I am very much excited for where this arc ultimately will take the characters, and I'm really excited to see that ultimate reveal moment where Ahsoka finally uses the Force and tells Trace and Rafa that she was a Jedi. So on that note, we are now moving into the back half of the final season of Star Wars The Clone Wars, which is crazy to say. Again, all of this has just been a huge gift, and I cannot wait to get into the more eventful episodes now with this arc. So I will catch you guys next week or right now. Now on to Dangerous Debt Season 7, Episode 7 of The Clone Wars final season. This third episode of the Ahsoka Walkabout arc is by far, to me, the best in it so far, because I think, as great as it was spending extra time with Ahsoka again for the first time in many years down in the underworld of Coruscant, which now looked amazing as we get to see a really good, authentic look at the underworld, and then we get to see how a pair of sisters who are new to crime elsewhere in the galaxy confront a crime syndicate like the Pikes for the first time, and as they begin to venture out and get a real taste for what these operations truly are like out there. And it was so cool seeing Kessel and how amazing the animation is. This episode had a lot more substance. Dangerous Debt not only had really great action sequences all the way through with the Pikes as they keep trying to escape, and honestly it was Ahsoka's best hand-to-hand combat scene ever when she goes up into one of the towers and takes out a ton of the Pikes. However, it was the scene early on that I think is going to stick with us for a while, where Rafa explains to Ahsoka finally, when Ahsoka asks, "What if I was a Jedi?" And then Rafa gives her the story that Trace and Rafa's parents, and they all lived together up top on the surface, and then one day Zero the Hutt was escaping from Republic custody with the help of a red-eyed bounty hunter who took out a ship, and it crashed right into their home. And they killed their parents. And I think that is a wild tie-in, and the connection with the Jedi is that there was a green Jedi and she had to use the Force to redirect the speeder, and then it wound up hitting their home, killing their parents. And so the Jedi just knelt down and said, "I had to make a choice, but the Force will be with you always," like some weird mystical PR machine that doesn't really seem to have a heart or a soul. That's kind of the way Rafa described it, and then that was it. Trace and Rafa were just left to figure out their lives and survive on Coruscant, and wound up going into the underworld to make ends meet and begin a new life as orphans, essentially. And it was a fantastic scene, and further cemented everything I was saying about Trace and Rafa. Unlike a lot of animated Star Wars characters we've received since the Clone Wars ended in 2014, they're authentic, genuine, real people, which I appreciate. Now, was there some Rebels-esque campiness a little earlier on when Trace is trying to escape from the Pikes inside the prison? Yeah. Some of the sequences got a little too much, a little too canned. However, as the scene progresses, it gets better and better, and Ahsoka nearly has to reveal that she is a Force sensitive on the bridge as the Pikes are trying to separate it, and it was really, really well done. And I thought it was so cool seeing just two average people's reaction to a Jedi, essentially. Force jumping, right? Not even seeing where they went. It was so fast and they went so far, they thought Ahsoka just fell in. Really, really cool. And then, as you get to the end of the episode, you start to see the Night Owls. They're briefly included. And on the Pike homeworld there, on Obadiah, I assume investigating Maul and his connection with the Pikes. Maybe the Pikes are doing business with Maul again. Who knows? But Bo-Katan is with the Night Owls undercover on Obadiah investigating the Pikes. And they see Ahsoka. And Bo-Katan references when she met Ahsoka the first time on Karlak. And it was just so cool. And they looked amazing, and the whole episode once again looked amazing. The city on Obadiah looked phenomenal as well. I cannot get over how stunning the animation is, and it's cool that this arc is actually going to be more of a direct link into Siege of Mandalore than I initially expected. At first, I thought that the arc was going to kind of end in the final episode. Bo-Katan was going to show up with the Night Owls and was going to be like, the Jedi aren't helping us. We heard that you left. We need some help, or whatever. You can convince them to send a legion of clones, and then they would be on their way, and that was going to end this arc. But the Night Owls already show up in this episode, and that's really, really cool. Bo-Katan, again, they look amazing with the hoods on. It was phenomenal. So I can't wait to see the final episode of this arc now knowing that it's a bit more than just the slower filler in-between arc between Bad Batch and Siege of Mandalore, and that it actually does indeed directly tie into Siege of Mandalore and transition us right into the final arc of the series. So I will see you guys next week or right now for the end of this arc. And here we are. We have reached the end of the Ahsoka Walkabout arc, the second to last arc for the entire Clone Wars series. This 4-episode arc certainly did not need to be 4 episodes. I am glad that a lot of people seem to have enjoyed it more than I did. I would have to say my favorite parts of the Ahsoka Walkabout arc, now having watched the final episode of it, again, definitely just spending more time with Ahsoka back in the Clone Wars, the incredible animation, the visuals and environments. Ashley Eckstein bringing her absolute best performance as the character thus far, so I can't wait to see what she delivers for Siege of Mandalore. Ahsoka just feels so much more real and authentic now than she ever has before, and I cannot say that I enjoyed the story really at all. I was definitely completely uninterested in Trace and Rafa's story by the time the 3rd episode rolled around and they had been captured, and especially by the time the 3rd episode rolled around and they escaped. Ahsoka didn't reveal herself. They goofed around on Obadiah for a little bit. We had a nice cameo from the Night Owls in the 3rd episode, and then they're just captured again, and so the whole episode was basically a bust. And to me, the Ahsoka Walkabout arc, I'm always going to remember it for its best moments, right? So Ahsoka looking up at the entirety of the underworld, trapped and alone, is really moving in the 1st episode, and her telling her that her older brother taught her how to do certain things, or the Skywalker Academy, actually encountering Anakin through the Force as she passed by the Venator he was on with Admiral Yularen over Coruscant. And you know, there were additional moments in there where Ahsoka is questioning her involvement with the Jedi and feeling guilty for ever having been one, essentially, by the time Trace and Rafa finally tell her in the cell on Obadiah why they live the way they do, why they're so completely, you know, lacking of, you know, in trust for people, because their parents were killed during Cad Bane's, you know, jailbreak of Zero the Hutt on Coruscant, and Luminara Unduli did absolutely nothing to console them after their parents were murdered. There are amazing moments in the Ahsoka Walkabout arc, but overall, the structure is just not there. It's not engaging. It's underwhelming. It's painfully slow. there are so many scenes in there, especially in this last episode, that are just straight out of Rebels. And to me, Star Wars is more than just goofing around with the local aliens and throwing in a few punches before tossing a Trandoshan with a fire hat or a safety hat on down a pit. It's just, those parts of Star Wars don't interest me as much anymore. Maybe they work for kids, and maybe that is why they're in there. I don't know. The Ahsoka Walkabout arc was not for me. It would be cool to see more of Trace and Rafa, maybe in a book or something somewhere. I wouldn't mind seeing their stories continue. But to me, it's just a relief that this arc is finally over. And I loved the Siege of Mandalore build-up in the final episode with Maul appearing as a hologram to the Pikes and us getting clarification that essentially the Shadow Collective was merged in with the Crimson Dawn, and him being a Sith is essentially holding them all hostage and saying, you either work with me or I'll just kill all of you. And so the Pikes are forced to work with him again, and now bo-katan finally picked up Ahsoka after following her back to Coruscant and just said, hey, we have a common enemy, here's Maul, you got 5 minutes to decide, let's go. I'll tell you more on the ship, and I kind of thought the initial pitch would be a little bit more than that before Ahsoka decided to go hunt down Maul. But either way, I cannot stress to you, despite how underwhelming this arc was, how amazing it is that it even exists, that we got Bad Batch as well. 2 entire extra arcs is not something that I take for granted. And again, to me, it's just about having the Siege of Mandalore. That is the most important thing. I truly hope all 4 episodes deliver in this final arc. So, man. Alright guys, well, until I guess the end of the series will be when I post my next block of reviews. I appreciate all of you guys here, and I'll see you at the end. Take care, guys.